Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this event. And today we have a guest speaker, Lexi. She will talk about the kind of like AR, how to make some narratives in augmented reality. Okay, so let me pass the baton to her. Okay, so yeah, thank you.
All right, so hey everybody, my name's Lexi Cleveland. I work for a company called ARtGlass, and we focus on building augmented reality experiences for museums and other cultural sites. And today we're just going to talk about how we can use augmented reality to expand historical narratives. So just to say a little bit more about myself, I am a public historian. And what that really means is I enjoy engaging with the public and helping them appreciate their history and the history of others more. I'm also a technologist, so I work with augmented reality, and I use augmented reality to better tell the stories of my ancestors. I am from Virginia, so we're based in Richmond, Virginia, and I like using emerging technology to teach people in a new way. I'm also the Vice President of Client Services at ARtGlass. And to say a little bit more about ARtGlass, we are the world's leader in cultural site augmented reality experiences. We're the first company to be able to scale wearable augmented reality. We have 50 plus deployments around the world at sites as diverse as ancient Pompeii, to Madame Tussauds wax museums, to slave plantations in the South. So really a pretty expansive portfolio for us. And what we really focus on is location-based AR experiences. So I think a lot of people are, of course, familiar with VR experiences. So things that you can do remotely, things you can do in your living room. But for us, we're really focused on having people go to the locations where things happened. So before we dive into, location-based experiences, expanding your narratives, I wanted to ask everybody a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. When you think of emerging technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, do you think that those technologies have the capacity to do harm? And anybody feel free to answer, so don't be shy about unmuting yourself.
Yeah,
Hi, oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to say feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay. This is ET, and I thank you. I'm really excited to learn about this, and I've actually, when I got the announcement, I checked out some of your other museums and things, and they're really cool. But I'm a product of Silicon Valley. I started out working in high tech with Intel, Siemens, and startups during .com. And then I went into healthcare. So I'm a clinical researcher for oncology, and I'm looking at technology for health and wellness. And I've seen a tremendous change, in what we're able to do, but there's definitely harm. There's concerns with privacy and coercion. And, we were just talking in a previous talk here about manipulating, people to do things that aren't good, healthful habits. So I definitely know it can do harm. I actually have worked with lawyers here to, in trials. I'm not at liberty to talk about, but there's even the best of companies have evil ways. So I've become very skeptical. But by the same token, it's not to say that we can't have technology for good. We just have to have regulatory ways of working this. So I do work in the state of California with the consumer protection and other health agencies. And then on a more global level with the Open Voice Network on their ethics and healthcare forums. So there are communities out there that you can work with to have a voice and to change things for the better.
Unmute. All right, wonderful. Thank you, ET. That's really helpful. I guess, does anybody else want to answer? And it's all right if
Yeah.
not.
I think it's
Yeah.
a tool, and as with any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Thank you, Jim. All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say a tool is similar to money, right? Do you think money is good or bad? It depends on how you use it. So I would say, yeah, I mean, AR is a tool and it's a pretty powerful tool, right? Because it can catch the living data, keep changing around our environment. So we can get the most updated data. So I would say, yeah, this types of technology is so immersive, and especially for young children, right? Their brain hasn't developed mature enough to tell right or wrong or true or false, illusion or reality, right? So I would say, yeah, this is kind of a really powerful tool, and we all wish we can use in a good way, but you know, sometimes things will happen. Yeah, okay, that's my thoughts. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dominique. And I'd say I agree with absolutely all of that. So augmented reality is a tool. It can be used for good things. It can be used for bad things. So at least for me and my company, we really focus on how can we make our AR applications improve life for, society. So we really focus on taking a holistic approach to educating the public about history, educating the public about, kind of hidden narratives about marginalized groups. And as we, develop our company, we're always asking ourselves, like, what is the most ethical route we can take? And I assume that most people on this call are, technologists as well. So I would be remiss if I did not say I hope everybody, considers the ethics of what they're doing as we are, developing these emerging tools. So at least for me and my niche, that is, telling more complete stories. For somebody like ET, it's, ethical healthcare. So as you go along, just make sure that you're carrying those ethics, because people who are in these emerging technology fields really have the ability to alter the future for better or worse. And I'm hoping that most people are doing that for the better. So now that we've talked about that a little bit, I want to dig into what we do specifically. So talking about, the ethics of AR, talking about location-based experiences. For my company, since we are, dealing with cultural sites, museums, that also means that sometimes we have to deal with some bleaker subject matters. So for example, things like plantations, where my ancestors were enslaved, throughout American history. And the reason why we chose augmented reality instead of virtual reality is because we feel like being in the place where things happened is incredibly important. There's really no way to simulate, actually being on a historical battlefield, actually being at a historical plantation. You can digitize that, but nothing actually compares to, having your feet on the actual ground where historic events have taken place. And so our hope is, by giving people more information while they're at a location, we can encourage them to not only learn more about their own history or the history of people around them, but also encourage them to appreciate and want to protect these sites. Historic preservation, historic sites are constantly under threat, whether that is, redevelopment, neglect. So getting the public to actually see the things around them and understand their significance is an incredibly important thing for me. And because I am a public historian, sorry, I ask a lot of questions because I like engaging with people. So I have another set of questions here. For you guys, what do you think makes a site historic? So when you're thinking about your own neighborhood, when you're thinking about the things around you, what makes a site historic?
Feel free to unmute yourself.
I guess if it's played a role in history in some way, although it seems to be somewhat of a subjective thing.
Yeah, I think as long as there's something happen or something that trigger your emotion, something happen, it can all be historical. Yeah, it's subjective. For example, like my home, my grandparents' home. I don't know, maybe it's not a significant set historical, but it's probably historical for me because there are a lot of things happening, and maybe historical will be some big event happens in some certain area. For example, like I believe in the future Ukraine will be a historical, everything happened there will be historical, yeah, place, and people will study and write into the textbook. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
This is DT. I live in Santa Cruz, California, and originally from Arizona. So I and just in my lifetime, I've seen these states change a lot, and different cultures, different traditions, all meshing together. So I like my Latina roots, but by the same token, here in California, I've learned so much more about other cultures. In Chinatown and in the Italian and all of this. So to me, just looking at the buildings and looking at old photos, or just seeing old posters from events that happened. To me, that's all history. And I like to just walk around. You don't even have to go to a Disneyland or anything. You could just walk around through town and explore these things. So to me, it's looking at the past and appreciating it. And to me, that's kind of a personal history, but I think it's kind of, you're doing it in a much better way, where I'm just kind of finding it, tripping over it myself.
All right, does anybody else have anything to add?
JT, do you want to share something?
Sure. I mean, I would just echo what actually, Dominic, you just said. Whether a site has historic significance, historic value is really in the eyes of the beholder. Now, obviously, there are some sites that have made the history books, Tiananmen Square, and certainly multiple locations here in the United States or Germany, where I'm from originally. But at the end of the day, any place can hold historic value, especially if you have some sort of emotional attachment to that place, because your ancestors were there, or something significantly happened to your own life in that particular location, but it might not have any meaning to anybody else.
All right, thank you. And I would like to touch upon that last point that JT just made, that maybe there's something that's historic to you, but other people don't consider it that way. And that's why I wanted to ask this last question as well, is, are all historic sites and stories treated equally? Well, I would argue absolutely not. So especially if you look at American history, so that's usually what I'm dealing with. There's a lot of attention paid to essentially white history. We really love talking about wars, so whether that's Revolutionary War, Civil War, but then histories for Black people, Asian people, Hispanics, they kind of take a back seat. So not only are those histories not talked about as much, a lot of the historic sites just aren't preserved either. So especially like just coming from my background, a lot of the historical sites that are significant for African Americans have been destroyed and are essentially parking lots, literally. So historic sites aren't treated equally, but that's one of the things that augmented reality can help with, especially if we make augmented reality more accessible, which we'll also talk about. So that means that, say ET, if you're walking around your neighborhood, you can, create an application to tell people about a building that otherwise they might pass by because they don't realize that something significant happened there. So being able to layer over stories, allowing people to, tell their own stories using this emerging technology has the ability to bring equality and equity to what has previously been, very much a white dominated, landscape in terms of history and cultural sites. So to just dig into some specific examples, two of our projects are George Washington's Mount Vernon. So that's the plantation of the first president, George Washington, and then James Monroe's Highland, another president in his plantation. And when we were building out the augmented reality experiences for these sites, we started scripting everything, and we're like, well, how can we make sure that we're telling a cohesive, complete narrative? Because a lot of people, they go there, of course, to hear about the presidents, but the presidents aren't the only people, living on these estates. They have, well, an entire, group of enslaved people there who are really the ones doing the work around these plantations. But if you go to these very well manicured landscapes, you would never know that atrocities took place there. So with James Monroe's Highland, we took the approach of doing the characters as animations. So they are based on real historical records of enslaved populations there, as well as, James Monroe and his family there, because it's also a big point for us to not tell, kind of segregated stories. We want to intertwine these narratives because these narratives all go together. It's not as if you have, presidential history and enslaved history. They're part of the same story. So we're very intentional about making sure that we're, telling a holistic view of things on the ground. And so for all the characters at Highland, we chose animations just because we don't really have, like photographs of, any of the enslaved people. So you kind of have to approach, how do we want to depict these people in, the most respectful way? We decided animation because that does kind of put a layer between saying, this is kind of affectionately, this is, part imagination, part historical record, because for, unfortunately, the enslaved population, there's not always really great records. You kind of have to fill in the gaps. And so all throughout this estate, this is an indoor and outdoor tour. Folks are wearing smart glasses, and they're walking through the plantation and able to see these characters, telling the stories of enslaved people back in place in this plantation, giving an authentic narrative of how their lives were, on this property. And prior to that, if you were just, walking around Highland, you might just think, oh, these are beautiful gardens, these are beautiful grounds. So being able to layer over some honest history just leads to having a more, complete, comprehensive story, and allows people to appreciate narratives that they otherwise might not have been aware of. Same case for George Washington's Mount Vernon. That's a really long tour. It's like an hour long, also indoor, outdoor. And of course, you're learning about the president, but once again, you're also bringing in, here goes all the people who were running this estate and essentially allowed him to become the person he was, because he could not have been president and also like run a plantation. Here's the people who are behind the scenes, actually making things happen. So I want to pose another question to you all. When you think about your communities or, your background, are there stories that you feel like are consistently missing from the narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a Taiwanese, right, in America, people always think I'm Chinese. I mean, I don't want to argue that, because that's a kind of a big things that right now, after Ukraine, people think, oh, Taiwan will be the next Ukraine, right? So yeah, so during COVID, I can say that a lot of people, because the interesting thing is that sometimes when you see someone's last name, you kind of know where this person came from, right? My last name is Wu, which is a Chinese last name. I mean, we share the same language and kind of same history, right? But we have different thoughts, right? So, sometimes people, I know it's a joke, right? Because before, I would say back in 2020, I ran a dedicated desk in WeWork, kind of work on my things. And then my friend, so-called friend, they just joke about it. I know it's a joke, but when COVID happened, they kind of throw me into a room and say, go back to China. Don't stay here because we don't want COVID or something. And I was like, hey, I've been here for over 11 years and I haven't been back for a while. And it feels like, hey, I'm not even Chinese anyway. I feel like a lot of misunderstanding, but it's so hard to explain my roots. And then it's nothing with China, but it seems like, there's something related to China, right? And I kind of totally disagree with whatever Chinese president or, she was doing right now. So yeah, I feel like, wow, Is there any way, because you see like Asian, people always think either you are Japanese, Korea, or Chinese. There's no one else, no country exists, right? So yeah, so even though I'm a little islander, and pretty soon maybe there's a highly chance that I will be Chinese. But yeah, it's just like, yeah, just look at this. I feel like it's great because, you know, it's kind of minority. I'm like a minority of minority. And nobody even know. Like I don't even know whether I'm Chinese or Taiwanese in here. So yeah, it's very interesting to kind of dive into like the minorities history. Yeah.
I think there's layers and layers and layers of historical things that occur, you know, pretty much everywhere. Like I live near a barn that's supposedly historic, but it's, if you look at it now, it's all collapsed. And so nobody really knows anything about that. I think people go in and from time to time steal some of the lumber to make furniture out of and things like that. And so they can say, I have this historic lumber that I used to make this chair or whatnot. But I think something that Dom brings up, and while you were talking, I was thinking, you know, on Google Maps, for example, you can turn on photographs. So it will show you like sites where photographs were taken, then you can click on those photographs. And I suppose you could have a very similar thing overlaid on Google Maps using their API that would have historical sites, and you know, everybody could contribute to that and whatnot. And I was thinking, if you did something like that, you'd probably inevitably have conflicts where you might put one historical thing down and somebody else might have a totally different view of that, and they might want to argue with it or whatever. And I think that what that brings up, as with Dom's case, is we have to treat all of this with respect. I think that's a big part of this. And we see this constantly in the news where people don't treat these things with respect. And I think we have to, that's sort of a priority.
Yeah, this is ET. When I was growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, they decided to build the Phoenix, which is now International Airport. And this is like a big chunk of land. And I remember as a kid, I went to a school that was built out of adobe. And then there were other little churches and Indian habitats and Latino habitats, all these adobe buildings that had been there for a long time, you know, ranches and all of this, but they were just flattened. We had to change school. They built a new school and they moved us out, but it would have been nice to preserve some of that and keep, you know, again, the cultural aspects rather than, okay, here's a big runway now, you know, 25 runways going into Phoenix International Airport and just gutted everything. So that's kind of sad, but it would have been cool to preserve some of that and have people understand what was there before, and knowing that, yeah, we need an airport, but, you know, at the what sacrificing of history and displacing people and cultures was the issue back then, and probably still now.
All right, thank you all. And I think you all bring up really excellent points. And at least in my work, that's, you know, something I try to do. So, you know, as Dominique mentioned, you know, helping people, you know, investigate their own biases, you know, to help stop discrimination. So teaching people about others so that they can hopefully better appreciate it. Or, you know, using ET's example of, you know, leveling a community. There's always kind of politics around like whose communities get leveled, of course, but using augmented reality, you're able to put things back in place. So I assume, you know, for younger folks who, you know, were born after this airport was built, you know, they would never know that there was a thriving community in that location at one point. So you're able to use augmented reality to tell stories, to say, well, yeah, what's now, you know, a runway? Well, this used to be my school, and here are the things that happened here. And like, you know, here goes the, you know, the church that was here for the last 100 years, and now it's gone. And if you have 3D modeling, you know, you can even put those structures back in place as you're telling these stories. So that's why I think augmented reality is a very powerful tool, especially for marginalized communities, because you can tell a narrative that challenges the kind of accepted or main narrative of the powerful. I guess anybody else before we move to our next slide? So more to that point, augmented reality doesn't just have to be, you know, pure technology. What I have on the slide here is actually one of our AR walking tours. So that's me as a tour guide, which I was in a prior life as well. So I used to work at Colonial Williamsburg. But we use augmented reality in conjunction with live human guides so that we can kind of have the best of both worlds. And I really want to talk about the Monument Avenue tour a little bit more in depth because it is, I think, interesting on multiple levels. So Monument Avenue tour is a 2-hour-long walking tour of a street called Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia. I'm not sure how much of Virginia history folks know, but Richmond, Virginia used to be the capital of the Confederacy. So the folks in the Civil War who were fighting to keep people like me enslaved. So we were the capital. And well after the Civil War, we erected a monument at Avenue of just giant monuments. I mean, these things are huge, celebrating people who were fighting in favor of, you know, keeping slavery, essentially. So incredibly intimidating, you know, for Black people or other people of color to be going down this boulevard with like these monumental statues to, you know, racists and enslavers. But over the course of the 2020 protests, those monuments got taken down. And, you know, ever since the monuments went in back in like the 1890s on up through the protests, there's kind of a constant battle for who controls the narrative around these structures. So augmented reality, what I did was essentially built a guerrilla tour. So, you know, completely unauthorized, didn't ask anybody to do it. And that's kind of the beauty of AR. You don't need permission. And, you know, built a comprehensive 2-hour-long tour, you know, telling people an honest history of the Civil War, because a lot of people have very bad education around it and, you know, what it was actually about. You know, taking them from location to location, showing them where the former monuments were, and just teaching them, you know, Black history, honest history, cutting through a lot of the propaganda that was produced around these monuments. But it wasn't one-sided. So although people are wearing the glasses and, you know, they're in panoramas, you know, they're seeing 3D models, we stop after every stop and actually have a discussion. And that's the advantage of having a tour with a live guide, is because when you're talking about really controversial subjects, you need two-way interaction. You really need people to be able to like push back against what you're saying, you know, ask clarifying questions. And you can't just do that with technology alone. You need that human connection. And we found that this tour, you know, was incredibly successful. People were writing me like, you know, I learned so much. And, you know, I went back home and we had, you know, dinner with our kids and we were telling them everything we learned. And, you know, I realized, you know, that maybe I had the wrong idea about history. So being able to, you know, do hybrid tours adds in an additional layer of understanding when you're trying to use AR to tell the stories of marginalized people. I guess any questions or comments about this tour?
I think what you're doing is very interesting, and we have so many rules in our society. I just wonder if various locales will try to pass rules that say, if you're going to do AR tours of our city, you're going to need to get a license and get your tours approved and all that stuff.
I mean,
I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, sorry, JT.
No, Jim brings up a very important point, and he did it also in his previous comment, which is who is going to be the arbiter of truth here, right? So we've come about this topic so many times now with Facebook and other social media being mainstream, having become mainstream platforms for information of about world events, really. But who is to say that this is not biased information, that this is not information pushing us into forming opinions that are tilted in one way or the other? It's going to be the same with an augmented reality tour, whether it is about historic sites or what I'm particularly interested in is AR for tourism. There's always going to be one person or an entity, a group in charge of accumulating the information and then publishing the information. And how do we make sure that this is done in an unbiased and objective way?
Can I ask, like, what's the definition of unbiased narrative? Because I feel like everything has a bias if it is a storytelling. I don't know. It's just me. It's hard.
Maybe it all comes down to freedom of speech, where you can't really prioritize one narrative over another in terms of allowing people to express them.
Yeah.
But then we're back into the Facebook dilemma where everybody, can voice their opinions, informed or uninformed. And then it's just a matter of who's got the bigger megaphone to get his or her opinion across. And it might completely be biased and for nefarious purposes and do more harm versus good. This goes back to the very, very first question, Lexi, that you asked, which is, or was, do you think that AR can be used in a harmful way? And so I think, yes, it can, just as any other social media platform right now can be used in a harmful way.
I think that's fascinating. And one of the things, being a technology developer myself, one of the things that I've thought of when it comes to this debate about, what's the truth and what's not, I don't think anyone can ever come up with an algorithm that tells you what the truth is. And so when you say, well, we just want the truth to be said on Facebook, what algorithm are you going to use to come up with that? I mean, we can subjectively come up with it as humans, but it's such a difficult thing. And another thing this brings to mind is there used to be a show called Max Headroom, and it's politicians that are trying to decide all these things, and Max Headroom had a little bit that he did in his show one time. He said, how do you know when a politician is lying? He said, when their lips are moving. So these politicians, they're trying to focus on having just the truth be told. How can you trust those politicians? So it's a very difficult area, I think. It's a very big challenge.
This is ET. I live here in a senior park, and believe it or not, I met a couple of people who believe that the space race is a farce and we never landed on the moon. I mean, they truly believe that. So, and then the same, when I was helping with COVID vaccines and people are anti-vaxxers and blah, blah, blah. So you're always going to get people that are, stick to their guns on their beliefs, and you may or may not be able to change their minds. But I feel that if we have, and especially in this country, we're very free to say what we can and put it on there. I just feel that if it gets manipulated, there's like big money or greed aspects that take over, then that's the danger. But I like the fact that anyone can, get on Clubhouse or get on a blog or create a website and tell their truth. And then you as an individual can explore and decide what, works for you. I've always been more of an independent thinker, thanks to my relatives, my grandmother, who was a bullfighter in the 1920s, telling me it's a man's world, but you're going to learn to live through it. But I feel that nowadays there's a lot of people who don't think for themselves. They just kind of get on bandwagons and causes without really knowing the truth. So if they can experience it from a non-pressurized, here's a history of the area you live, or the history of medicine, or the history of the space race, and who the players and what happened when, then maybe they'll come to understand it. They may not necessarily believe it, but at least they'll try and understand it.
Yeah, and actually, like I kind of every day I'm watching or reading Ukraine, like the war news, and someone told Elon Musk to, just block Russian's news, right? Because he owns Starlink, right? And he said, no, I'm not block anyone's, free speech, the freedom, right? So he reject. But the interesting thing is that what we receive, the media that we receive, we know that Zelensky is a hero, right? We know that Ukraine people want to fight their freedom and the Russian is invader. However, because I can read Chinese and I read some simplified Chinese news, it seems like they say Zelensky is a cloud. He put his people into, war is his fault, and he's still acting, right? And then Russian is, the hero, and I think I even watched like some Chinese movie clips. Seems like a teacher is trying to teach like the elementary school kids, like Putin is the hero. He's trying to unify Russian, da 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 da. And as far as I know, all the news in Russian is so different from what we read, right? So I started to realize, and in Taiwan, I know that American is trying to help Taiwan, but Taiwanese doesn't want American to send troops or do anything because we don't want to be a war zone, right? And I know, but all my American friends, like, hey, Taiwan needs to fight for freedom, but as far as I know, all my family, nobody wants war. We just shut up, and China won't invade as long as we behave good. So there are so many mainstream medias, and I feel like it's kind of religions. It depends on what you believe. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Emily said something very important, which is everybody's entitled to have their opinion and even voice their opinion. However, you're not necessarily entitled to your own facts. And as soon as governments come in, or corporations with a profit motive, then all of a sudden having a platform, whether it's Facebook or any similar type of megaphone, becomes very dangerous, right?
One thing I think is interesting is Putin is relying on his ability to control the media. And, good luck. And in today's times, I don't think in the long run, there's no way to control the media. And Lexi, I think what you're doing is fabulous. I really like the idea that you're getting in there and doing these tours and nobody can do anything about it. I like that. I really like that.
Well, thank you all. That was a wonderful discussion. And I think it's really important for, people, not just me, but other people to be able to, tell their stories in this way as well. So, you guys mentioned how, it's dangerous when you have a company like Facebook that has the megaphone. And one way to combat that is by decentralizing things. So allowing everybody to kind of tell their truth. But as we've touched on, that can be dangerous as well. So, using my Monument Avenue tour as an example, the whole reason I even had to make this tour is because people were spreading false history, saying like, oh, actually slavery was really great and all the enslaved people were very happy. And you're just like, that's not historically accurate. Or, fighting the narratives of, oh, well, they weren't fighting for slavery. It's like, no, you can like read their own speeches and their constitution. It's like literally there. So, being able to use primary source documents and say like, no, you don't have to take my word for it. You can, hear this directly from Jefferson Davis, who's the Confederate president. Like, you don't have to believe me. You can believe him. He's telling you exactly why he's doing what he's doing. And I think that, does help, being able to have primary source documents. And that goes back to my earlier point of why I think it's important to have historic preservation, to be able to preserve, a slave cabin, being able to preserve these documents. So when you do have people trying to give, completely false counter narratives, you can point to these documents, you can point to these locations and say, no, these things are real, they're grounded in reality. If you're arguing otherwise, bring your proof, bring your evidence. and I think, it is going to be an ongoing issue as we build out, the augmented reality ecosystem. But I think, probably as individuals, what we can do is just to make sure that we're telling our truth, and that if we're seeing, these false, harmful narratives, that we are challenging them. But I guess any other questions or comments on this before we move on? And thank you all. You all have like very wonderful, thought-provoking comments. So for our last point, I'm just going to talk about making accessible AR and AR accessible. So one of my favorite things about doing my job is to make sure that I'm serving the broad general public. So augmented reality, making sure that it has captions, so that folks with hearing impairments can also, experience your tour. Making sure that things are sensory friendly, so that people with sensory sensitivities are also able to experience, what you're making. I guess one really kind of exciting, piece of customer feedback, like we just launched at an aquarium, and a mom came in to us after she had taken the tour. And that tour is both on glasses and on a Samsung tablet. And she was just like, oh, thank you guys like so much for making this. Both of her kids have autism, and so they kind of have some sensory issues. They're, they were kind of afraid of the fish. But by using the tablet, which, gives all the fish like little profiles, really helps people to like get to know the animals, like it helped the kids feel confident enough to, start actually approaching the tanks, because they were able to learn and say, oh, these fish aren't scary. Like, oh, I want to go up and meet, Neptune the turtle. So making sure that you're using AR to serve a broad public, so whether that's, children, people with, additional needs, making sure that you're making everybody feel included, because history is for everybody, learning's for everybody, education's for everybody. And if you're serving the public, you should serve all of the public. And then also just to talk about, my company a little bit, although we do, software and services, we do also have a self-service software platform. So right now I'm in beta, which has been interesting. It's been a lot, kind of taking people through the beta testing. But the whole idea around making a self-serve platform is so that people can start telling, stories in their own neighborhoods. So just what you're seeing there is just, an example of, that's actually like a shovel test pit at a plantation, but there's no coding required for it. We've built it for, essentially the everyman off the street to be able to use it, because we really want AR to be accessible and be able to get it in the hands of people who have stories to tell. And yeah, so that's all I have to say. If you guys have any questions, let me know.
Can you tell us a little bit about the glasses that you're using?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the glasses that you're seeing in these slides are Epson Moverio BT350s. They're a really great piece of hardware. Unfortunately, they're obsolete now. So if you want some, you'd have to buy them secondhand, but they're pretty sturdy. And what makes them really cool is the lenses are transparent, so you can still see, the world around you while you're wearing them. And that was important for us because, once again, I'm a historian. I don't want you to only be seeing, some type of virtual world. I want you to be able to see, the actual landscape, see, the painting or artifact I'm talking about, while also, bringing in, maybe some 360s, bringing in 3D models, bringing in videos, but just as a complement to the real world, not, overlaying it. So I think that's what makes those glasses cool. They are transparent, unlike, if you've done like VR where it's like, completely closed in. With these, you can still actually see everything, and it's just overlaying.
What was the cost to you for those glasses?
Gosh, I guess like originally, I think they were maybe like $1,400, but if you are looking on the secondhand market, you can probably get them for like $750, $800 if you check like eBay.
Wow,
and they also have
that's a huge expense for you.
Yeah, but at least for us, like it's not so bad because, we partner up with sites. So we're usually doing something like a rev share. So, when like somebody buys a ticket, we get a cut of that. But that's also like one of the reasons why we're also trying to do, software as a service, because now that also allows us to serve, things like tablets, things like phones. We have a web app now too. So you're not just stuck with using the glasses. If you want people to use their own phone browser, that's fine. Or, download an app on a phone or tablet, that works too.
So you're trying to be platform agnostic then. And I know there are a lot of people who say that if you're going to be successful with AR in the long run, you're going to have to be platform agnostic.
Yeah, and that's
Yes,
and
yes.
we just recently made that shift. So I guess we're still working on like the iOS stuff, but at least for Android, we support Android phones, tablets, and smart glasses. And you can also use iOS if you just use the web app because that's browser based. So yeah, like previously we were really focused on the wearables because they're really cool. Although I love phone and tablet AR as well, there's just nothing comparable to actually wearing a smart headset. Like you can't really recreate that on a phone in the same way. But as we were looking at, how do we expand? How do we make things more accessible? We just kind of had to acknowledge, not everybody has access to glasses. We need to make sure this works on phones. We need to make sure this works on tablets or, on the web. So glasses are cool, but they are quite limiting, in terms of just kind of budget and accessibility.
So if someone wants to go on your tour, do they have to schedule through you, or is it set up in a way so that they can just follow the tour by themselves using their device, whatever it happens to be?
So for all the new tours we're launching, or at least some of the new tours we're launching, some of those are, you just do it on your own. So for the web-based ones in particular, but otherwise, since we're at, historic sites, they're just buying those like the same way they would buy an audio guide ticket. Or for the Monument Avenue one, they were just scheduling those through me. They, just write me an email and I'll like take you out on Monument Avenue because it's in Richmond. So, but yeah, usually it's at, a museum site. So you're just walking up to the front ticket desk like you would anywhere else.
I'm thinking about, does it, it become like a VR, for example, like if the monument is so far away, like in Virginia, right? And I'm based in LA. Is there any possible that, more like a VR headset, so I don't have to fly to Virginia and test it out or experience it? I can just use VR and I can still feel the immersiveness, storytelling in my room. Yeah.
That's something we had considered, especially with the pandemic, because the pandemic, was a terrible time to be in like kind of like tourism and like location-based experiences. But we ultimately decided that we didn't want to go that route just because we are so dedicated to getting people, to actually be in that physical space. And I will acknowledge, of course, that does limit how many people can actually experience something because it requires, the cost and logistics of getting to a location. So I have nothing but, respect and love for the people who do say, like, I want people to be able to visit, the site from anywhere in the world. But it's just personally not what we do. We're really focused on saying, like, I want you to be here and experience it, while physically being on the ground where these things happened.
To that, I have a question, Lexi. First of all, thanks for the presentation, but I'm very curious about your project in Pompeii, Italy. Again, they using AR for tourism purposes. Is that a project that is ready for prime time to be scaled up, to maybe rolled out to other locations? Is there a revenue model behind it? Or what are your experiences from what I understand? It's just a pilot right now, or was a pilot?
Oh, no, it's live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can book it. And you have two options for the Pompeii tour. So you can either have a guided tour or you can do it self-guided. So for the guided tour, you have a live tour guide who like takes you from stop to stop. And then for the self-guided one, it's just like, GPS triggers.
Fantastic. And is that going to be rolled out to other locations as well, whether it's Italy or anywhere else?
Oh, yeah, we have like, deployments all over the place, but at least for the one that's closest to that, there's also a tour for the Herculaneum nearby. And yeah, we have tours all over the place. There's like 50 plus tours. They're like all over the place. But yeah, so if you're interested in booking that, I think you should be on the calendar invite. So I can just follow up and, send you the ticket booking information.
I would appreciate that. And one of the reasons I'm asking is I'm an organizer here of a technology group in Santa Monica, and we have a large number of members. And Dominic, you might remember Bruce. Bruce is one of our members here who is actually developing an AR solution for tablets and mobile phones. And he's deploying in Florence, Italy.
Oh, okay.
And I haven't followed up with him since COVID. He hasn't been very active in our virtual Zoom-based sessions, but I know he's been very much involved in that with the university over there, and he's traveled over there for several months out of the year and trying to get that project off the ground. I'm so glad to see that you've actually have implemented this, and it's up and running, and you not only have one tour, but you have multiple tours. Is this a separate, standalone business at some point for you in the future, or is this a side project? I'm curious.
I'm sorry. So I guess I did not introduce myself properly then. Sorry. So ARtGlass, we've been around since like 2017. We have like 3 million plus paying customers, like 50 sites around the world. So
none of this
is like theoretical.
Wow.
This is not theory. This is practice.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. That's my
Okay.
fault. I did not introduce myself properly. Yeah. No. Like we're all over the place. Like you can do all this on the ground. This is not like pie in the sky stuff. These are all real photos from like my real deployments. No.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right.
I have to confess, I'm sorry. I have to confess that, like what Dom said, like when you mentioned the Pompeii tour, I mean, if there's something on TV about Pompeii, I'm going to watch it, if there's some documentary or something like that. And so I sort of confess that I would like to see these things from my living room as well. And another thing, I find that I like to watch TV programs about things that I would never do. And one of the things that I would never do, but I am absolutely fascinated with, is climbing Mount Everest. And so I appreciate your technology, and it would be, there is such a rich history of Mount Everest and the climbers that have gone up there, and the problems that they've had. There's famous climbers that are frozen on the side of Mount Everest, and you walk by them as you go towards the summit. And something like this would be fascinating for that. Although I realize you're not going to be dragging people up to Mount Everest. But if there was a way to sort of experience that, that would be fabulous. So I realize you guys want to get people to those sites, but it's not going to happen with Mount Everest. And I'd sure like to see something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's really great, but I think it would probably just be the domain of another company, because at least and what we asked ourselves this a lot over this course of the pandemic. We're like, wow, literally all the museums and tourist sites are shut down. What are we going to do? Should we make this a virtual offering? And we just ultimately decided, no, we're sticking to kind of our guiding principle, and that's historic preservation and on location experiences. But I think that's great, and I'm sure there's probably like a VR company or somebody who would take that up, but for us, that's just not what we do.
Are your glasses stereo, or are they just the same?
Yeah.
Same
so they're binocular, and you can have different things in the lenses. So I really love using that for like historical stereographs. Stereographs are photos that are side by side. And then when you put them together, they become 3D. So for the Monument Avenue tour, I actually took Civil War era stereographs and put them in the glasses, so that now they're stereographic view again, where you have things popping out, and those are all historical. I didn't even have to manipulate them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we use so the Monument Avenue one's very heavy on period documents and speeches, because with a lot of other things we get kind of creative, but with that one, since it is so controversial, I really stuck to actually using the things I pull directly from the archive, with really no artistic license, because it's I'm not making any of this up, guys. You can literally see it for yourself from this photo from 1865. You don't have to believe me, look at the photo.
Well, something that I'm really into the stereo stuff, but something that people don't realize is that in Victorian times, for example, these stereo cards were the main form of entertainment. That was their television of their time.
Yeah, and I think that was like, because I am a nerd, like I'm a historian, and I think it was really satisfying for me to be able to take those stereographic, postcards and be like, wow, I'm like reviving, kind of this lost appreciation for this art form, and able to bring these stereographs back to life using, a headset. Like that's, kind of a crazy blend of like, the past and present. So no, I totally love it too.
And you sort of have to find the locations where those photographs were taken. In fact, there was a project, there's a annual conference called 3D Con, and I'm in the LA 3D Club, and we get involved with that every year. But they had a project where people took a bunch of these historical stereo cards, and they went back and they tried to find the precise location where they were taken and to shoot a new stereo view from that exact location so that you could compare them.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, there we go. And that could also have like AR applicability to be able to say like, show, here goes the historical stereo view, here goes the modern stereo view, and you're able to, put both of those in the glasses, stored on the puck, so you don't need Wi-Fi or anything either. And be able to have like, a tour of, say Richmond or, Santa Monica or wherever you happen to be, and say like, here goes the past view, here goes the current view, use that 3D capability, bring in those documents, and, stuff like that is actually also just really cost efficient. So that's like another thing as we were building up this platform and, like conceptualizing everything, making sure that for the average person or the average museum, you're able to just use your archival materials, but use them in really cool ways. So giving them AR capabilities without really having to bring in any outside costs to do that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Lexi, this is ET. I just signed up for your beta test while you were chatting here.
Okay, yay.
I'm one of these, I'm a technology junkie, but I do like to put a healthful spin. And we were talking earlier about COVID and people with depression and needing an outlet. So I've been working with Unity and Unreal, trying to get the virtual health clinic on Metaverse, which is going to be a long, it ain't there, but you're rocking it. You're doing stuff. So I can envision people that are depressed. We were talking about veterans who get diagnosed with cancer who want to commit suicide. And so we're using computer games and stuff right now to get them through PTSD, and now invoking, realize that you can get through the cancer treatment. You have a life to live and you have benefits. So, blah, blah, blah. But I could envision maybe using your tools for something like that. So, and these people could go back in time to the places that they feel safe, maybe walking through Golden Gate Park, maybe walking through the redwood groves, maybe hanging out at the beach, and kind of a therapy session at any time that they feel the need for it. So I think you have a lot going on here, and I'd like to experiment with it. And maybe if you could ping me, I might have some other places where you can present your product and to healthcare people, and we could work together on some things. So I think you have done a tremendous amount of work, and we're here to support you. Reach out to us if you have questions or want to have other discussions.
All right, well, thank you. Like, I really appreciate that, and like that goes for everybody. If you guys want to join the beta, yeah, just go to our website and you can shoot me an email. And I guess like I should probably specify. So yeah, up until this point, for like the last we've been in existence for like 5 years or something. Our software has been an internal tool. So we've been using that, to produce tours for clients. So what the beta is for this new, public facing platform so that people can make their own experiences. So that's the shift. So we've been doing this forever. And now we're essentially putting all of our learnings into a public platform. So that's the distinction. Oh, I got a little chat. Look at that. Oh, thank you.
Oh, I just put your website so people can just click.
So you guys can go to the website, and you can also just use the info form. So I know JT, I think it was, wanted information about booking tickets for Pompeii and stuff. So the info account goes right to my phone. So you can just use the contact form and I'll get all that and I'll get you guys set up with what you're asking for. Yes, any other questions or comments from anybody? All right, well, if not, you guys have been a great group. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think today is like a wonderful discussion because I think what you do is really meaningful and tied to, technology and also historical and unbiased history, right? I think this is really meaningful. Yeah, any other questions? Last one.
Do you have any glasses that you're looking at towards the future? This has been a big topic with us, is these glasses, these AR glasses.
Yeah, so the Epson move area, they have the newest ones. So those are the BT 40 and 40S. So they're the successor glasses to the one that you're seeing here. So we've just started experimenting with those, to see if they're a viable replacement. Have also been working with Lenovo a little bit, testing out those glasses. So right now the market's absolutely flooded with glasses, and I'm just starting to use them all too, since these ones became obsolete. But I say you are spoiled for choice. There's like so many hardware companies, like, kind of putting their, stake in this game right now.
Which one do you think is good? Because I might want to get one glass. I'm thinking about HoloLens, but it's just like $3,000.
It's so big too. So
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So at least for us, we looked at, HoloLens, we looked at Magic Leap, we looked at all sorts of other glasses, but for our use case, having something that's like very small and like lightweight, with a good battery life that can be used indoors and outdoors was important for us because of, what we do. We serve, public at tourism sites. So HoloLens just was not practical at all. Like, it takes forever to even get those things set up. So with the, move areas, they're like literally plug and play and you're, off and on your way. So I think what headset you use really just depends on your use case. If you're trying to do something like tourism, I think any of like the big headsets are just not practical. Like I've done some demos, seen other people's demos, and that's why they're never anything like more than demos, because they're just not really feasible for, a long-term, like high value site. They're just not really practical.
That's great information.
Keep unmuting myself. Sorry. I guess any other questions?
Oh, this was a great discussion. Thanks very much, Lexi, and thanks for organizing, Dominic.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great discussions. I've learned a lot. It's always exciting to be here. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. Then we will end our meeting today. And thank you, Lexi, for sharing your knowledge with us and sharing your company's work. It's amazing. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.